You can now pick up a refurbished Steam Deck from the Steam store at a discounted price. So if, like me, you're a little late to the party and you want to get your hands on one of the best handheld devices on the planet, then now could be the best opportunity. I managed to pick up a top of the range 512GB version for the same cost as a 256GB version on the UK Steam store. So let's take a look at the unboxing experience and setup to see exactly what condition this Steam Deck arrived in and how I got on playing with it. Valve say that they've tested all of these devices for general performance and battery life, but that they may come with some cosmetic imperfections. Any nerves that I had when I was opening up that box was soon blown away by the fact that Steam had sent a brand new carrying case and power bank to go alongside the refurbished Steam Deck. There are a few scratches that I can find on one of the joysticks, but other than that, the rest of the body seems to be completely fine. And when I turned on the screen, I was delighted to see that there were no issues with the display either. If you are used to console gaming devices, then don't be alarmed if the Steam Deck takes a little bit longer to boot up than something like a Nintendo Switch. That's just the nature of the Steam Deck, which is more like a handheld gaming computer than a full ready-made console. The big positive is that means you can play all kinds of games on this device, from everything in your Steam library to emulated ROMs and even remote play from devices like your PlayStation 5. As a busy parent, that is my main motivation for picking up this device, so I thought I'd go ahead and get a dbrand skin that made it look a little bit more like a PlayStation controller. In the back of my mind, I also wanted to make sure I had a skin that could cover up any big scratches or blemishes on the main body of the console, but I mean, it came in such great shape that wasn't really an issue in the end. I have to say this is one of the most difficult dbrand skins I've ever put on, and I didn't do a good job of it, but I wanted to show you the honest truth. There is a really great tutorial on the dbrand website that walks you through every single step of this process, but as someone who's not particularly delicate or good with fiddly things, I found it really difficult to apply this in a consistent way. That's not to say I wouldn't recommend getting a dbrand skin, because I still feel like it makes the Steam Deck look a lot more personalized and it feels a lot nicer holding it in your hands. But you do have to make sure that you are willing to accept some imperfections if you're not the neatest person in the world. The thing is though, this is kind of the DIY nature of the Steam Deck, and I don't mind if it's a bit scruffy around the edges. The real fun for me comes in launching the Steam Deck's desktop mode and getting some games onto the system. I don't have the most exhaustive Steam Deck library. It's mainly old Football Manager games and a couple of indie titles here and there. But I did pick up Baldur's Gate 3 as someone who loves a good tactical RPG. And I also picked up Planet of Lana, which is a really beautiful Studio Ghibli inspired stealth side-scroller, which is definitely worth a play. I've been really impressed by how smoothly both of those games run, and I know I'm going to have a brilliant time playing both of them. Now, although I did get the 512GB version, I also made sure to get a 512 Samsung Evo SD card to just bump up that storage a little bit and use as a good home to put all of my ROMs. This is where things potentially get a little bit fiddly if you're not used to messing around with computers, but there are some great third-party Steam applications that can help you get all of your emulators set up on your device. I used an app called EmuDeck and followed the brilliant tutorial by Retro Game Core, which helped me get this set up in about half an hour, and I was able to drag and drop some of my Pokemon ROMs over to the console. Retro Pokemon games are kind of my comfort zone when it comes to gaming. I like the fact that I don't have to pay them too much attention, and for the past couple of years I've been playing them on my Game Boy Advance SP, but the battery life is so poor on that thing these days. Cool thing about the Steam Deck is it will actually give you about 7 or 8 hours of gameplay on a title like that. You're probably looking at closer to 2 hours if you're playing Baldur's Gate, but for Pokemon ROMs, it's really great. The next step was to get PlayStation Remote Play set up, complicated by the fact that Gabriel stormed into the room after his nap, but also that it is a little bit of a tricky process. You have to kind of run this Python script on your Steam console, but there are some great tutorials out there on YouTube that you can watch and walk you through this entire process. Exactly what I did, and the end result is that I can now play PlayStation games in bed on my Steam Deck. Of course, there are many other devices that you can do this on. I've used my iPad in the past, as well as a Backbone One controller for my phone. but they never felt like a dedicated console, and so having a Steam Deck to do this feels a lot more natural. It seems to run perfectly well if you're running a lower performance title like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but just playing a little bit through God of War, I did see a few glitches. So if this is expressly the reason that you're going to pick up a Stream Deck, it might be just worth waiting for that PlayStation Portal to come out later in the year and see how well that performs. All in all though, I have loved playing around with the Steam Deck. Getting to grips with the operating system can be a bit of a challenge, but it's well worth it when you consider the breadth of games you can actually play on the device. I'm really impressed by how pretty games like Planet of Lana look on this display, and Game Boy Advance ROMs really pop on it too. The Steam Deck is one of the best handheld gaming devices out there, but for casual gamers, it could also be the most frustrating. As a busy parent who never knows where the next chance to sit down with a game will come from, I decided to pick one up and see what all the fuss was about. The Steam Deck may look like a regular gaming console, but underneath the hood, it's more like a handheld PC. It runs a Linux operating system, and on top of that, Steam have built their own OS, which allows you to access the Steam store, as well as a whole host of other gaming services. That doesn't mean you can run everything out of the box. You will have to dig into Steam's desktop mode to get things like PlayStation Remote Play or Xbox Cloud Gaming set up. But if you ever just want to sit on the couch and play some games from your Steam library, or maybe tap into an emulator here and there, then the Steam Deck is a really appealing option. If you are coming from the Switch, you'll notice this is a pretty bulky handheld, mainly because of those two grips on the back of the device, but they also make the Steam Deck a lot more comfortable to use, even though it is a little bit bigger and heavier. If you watched my setup video, you'll know that I put a dbrand skin on mine to help a little bit with grip and just protect the device in general. I found it pretty difficult to apply the skin in certain areas, and maybe getting white was a mistake because I can already see some discoloration. Part of me wonders if I was a bit over the top with my hairdryer when I was trying to straighten out the edges, but I have noticed that this is a little bit more pronounced around the Steam Deck's air vents. And one thing you need to know about the Steam Deck is that it is going to run pretty hot, especially if you're playing a more demanding title. But to deal with that heat, the fans are going to run pretty loud too. So if your plan was to play this in bed, you better hope that your partner has a good pair of noise cancelling headphones. And in fact, even I had to use them most of the time when I was playing certain games like Planet of Lana to truly appreciate the brilliant soundtrack on that game. It can be a real joy to experience those gaming moments from anywhere around your house, sitting on the couch while somebody else is using the TV, or tucked up in bed, leaning into a more personal experience that I feel handheld gaming can afford you. However, it's not quite as portable as you might think. When you pack it into a protective case, it actually becomes a really sizable bulk that is too big for most backpacks, and the battery can drain incredibly quickly if you are playing a demanding title, so you will need to stay close to a power outlet or take a power brick with you in order to get the most out of it on the go. That said, one of the times that I did take the Steam Deck with me, I actually got stuck on a train for 5 hours between London and Liverpool, and I was able to go really deep into Baldur's Gate 3, and in those moments you just realise that the magic of the Steam Deck, being able to take such a wide range of systems with you on the go, is worth it for all of its rough edges. After a week or two of fiddling with the settings and getting things set up exactly how I wanted them to be, I was finally making progress with some really amazing titles that I didn't expect to have a chance to play otherwise. Maybe I was getting a bit carried away though, because at least on Baldur's Gate 3, this is when the crashes start to happen. Because unfortunately when you get about 20 hours into that particular game, the environments are going to get a bit busier, a little bit more demanding on the system, and you're going to start to experience a lot of crashes. Those crashes really can be crippling, especially when you haven't saved your game at a key moment, and sometimes launching these games can take an absolute age, so getting back into the title can be a real drag. Around the time that I started noticing these real performance issues was the time that Pokemon dropped their new DLC for Scarlet and Violet. Clearly, if I'm interested in those games, then I don't care too much about performance because they've been pretty terrible as well. But it is a game that I enjoy playing, especially because I like playing online on the ranked ladder, and so I dove into the DLC to pick up the new Pokemon that had been released. Going back to the Switch after a period of playing the Steam Deck, it really does feel like a toy, and it's definitely not as impressive as a device, but that catalogue of Nintendo classics gives it a real enduring appeal because Nintendo does focus so much on that classic catalogue of Nintendo games. The Steam Deck actually has very little crossover with it, and in fact, the only real area where they do crossover is in the indie titles that you'll find on the Steam store. So I actually found myself playing the Steam Deck one night and the Switch the next. Realised that although I had gotten really into Baldur's Gate 3, maybe I should look a bit deeper into the Steam store and find some titles that maybe are better suited to a handheld gaming experience. Just in that moment, Steam released a brand new update for the Steam Deck, and there was also one that came through for Baldur's Gate 3 that actually made it a lot more playable, and now I can fully make progress through Act 2 of the game without as many horrible crashes that I was experiencing earlier. This is another really cool thing about how Valve are approaching the Steam Deck. You get the impression that they see Steam OS as a really important aspect of their future, and so they're constantly trying to update it and listen to community feedback to include features that have been requested from the crowd. In truth, if you're looking for a completely stress-free experience, then you should probably just pick up a Nintendo Switch. If you're not as bothered about all those Nintendo style games and you want to have something that's a bit more adult, a bit more niche, then the Steam Deck is a brilliant option. With just a few simple and surprising accessories, you can take your Steam Deck gaming experience to the next level. To really get the most out of your Steam Deck though, it's very much worth using it in a docked mode. Valve have created their own dock that you can pick up on the Steam store, but I went for a much cheaper option on Amazon that came with all of the ports that I need to have a simple desktop setup. That includes an Ethernet port, 3 USB-A ports, a USB-C which is used for charging, and an HDMI output, which you could use to connect to a desktop monitor or a TV. But I actually went ahead and set it up with my iPad. This was inspired by a video I saw on Byte Review, but one gaming device he didn't try it with was the Steam Deck, so I just had to see for myself whether it worked. I'm glad I did test this out because it turned out the app that Tom was using on his Nintendo Switch and his PlayStation didn't work with the Steam Deck. So I actually found another solution, which is an app called Genki Studio. There is a bit of hardware you'll need to get this working. That includes a USB-C capture card and an HDMI 2.1 cable to make sure you're getting the fastest speeds possible. I've got my iPad set up on a VESA mount next to my computer, so if I manage to get my kids to nursery on time, I'll usually have half an hour free to just sort of decompress and play a bit of retro games before I actually start work. Now, admittedly, the resolution of the 12.9-inch iPad display is not perfect for gaming on the Steam Deck, but neither is the ultra-wide monitor that I've got next to it either. So this is a really nice option for me. And in fact, if you are focusing on kind of retro games that are more of a 4:3 aspect ratio, just pinching the screen to fill up that iPad display makes it an incredible experience. The cell shading on the Wind Waker is probably my favourite design of any Legends of Zelda game, and it really pops on the iPad's display. I was a little bit worried about input lag playing through all these weird cables and capture software, but it's actually completely fine playing on the iPad too. I have noticed if you play for a really long session, then it will not only drain your iPad's battery, but also slow it down in terms of responsiveness. So that is something to watch out for. But if you do just want to have a quick game, it is a really fun and viable option. Sometimes I like playing an online board game with my friends called Twilight Struggle, and this setup also means that I'd be able to speak to them and have Zoom on the webcam and my main monitor, and then just be able to play the game on the side, which is also quite fun. Now, of course, you're not going to be using the iPad's touchscreen to control this, so you will want to invest in a controller. If you want to get a controller that matches up with the back buttons on your Steam Deck, it's worth looking at 8BitDo, who do a lot of other controllers. But personally, I've been using the Xbox One controller because it's just a really easy option. It was lying around the house anyway. I like the fact that the buttons match up to the input commands on the Steam Deck itself. I'm not a massive fan of the thumbsticks on the Xbox One controller just because the way it taps against the side, but you know what, it's a light, comfortable controller that I can pick up anytime. instantly connect and just get straight into a game. If you're more of a keyboard and mouse gamer, then of course you can set them up here too. My main productivity mouse is the Logitech MX Master 3S, and I thought this would be a really good fit for the Steam Deck too, because it has this easy pair option on the base of the mouse itself, where you can click one button and just go between different devices. Up to 3 can be connected at any time. When it comes to gaming though, it doesn't actually have the highest DPI, so I've been using another gaming mouse. This one is much less expensive and it also runs on batteries, so throw it into your bag if you are traveling. And because it is so light and has a much higher DPI, it's much easier to use on gaming setup as well. When it comes to keyboards, I've been trying out quite a few different setups with the Steam Deck, and the one that I keep coming back to is the Newfie Air 75 V2. It has a very slim profile for a mechanical keyboard and an incredibly high polling rate, which not only makes it really satisfying if you want to use this for little bursts of productivity on the Steam Deck, but also it does make it very good for gaming too. If you're looking for a yet smaller option, you might want to consider the Logitech Casa keys. This does come as part of a package with a case and a touchpad too, but just as a standalone keyboard, I really like this as a membrane option. The arrow buttons are a little bit small for consistent gaming, unless you are very nimble indeed. Again, it's just a nice, cute little option. You could also go a little bit more heavy duty and use something like an iQnix L80. This one is the Cosmic Traveler version, and I just really like the space theme. I could imagine sitting back and playing something like Starfield on a keyboard like this. One thing that does bug me a little bit on the Steam Deck is the loud fan noise whenever it gets too hot. I really recommend using a pair of noise cancelling headphones for the best experience. In my opinion, these don't have to be gaming headphones. I've just been using my Sony MX100 Mark III. I must have had these for 6 or 7 years now, and they're still pretty much in perfect condition. Even the leather in the earpads isn't showing too much sign of wear. They have about an 8-hour battery life and can fast charge up to full in 30 minutes, so they're perfect for taking on a long trip. For someone who's used to using macOS, it turns out that Linux is a pretty familiar, if not stripped back experience. But if you're going to push the Steam Deck a little bit further, don't make the mistake that I did, which was to research the applications you wanted to install and then try to do them via the console. I wasted at least half an hour trying to do this before I realized that you could just install applications directly using the Steam Deck's Discovery Store. I may be naive, but I was also really impressed to see just how many familiar applications you can install via this method, as well as quite a few that I hadn't come across. Applications like Todoist, Anki, and even Duolingo are just a one-click install. And you can even get Spotify running on the Steam Deck, which is pretty cool if you've got it hooked up to some good speakers. One of the nice little discoveries that I made was a markdown text editor called Ghostwriter. It's a distraction-free typing experience, and it has a nice little glossary of all the different markdown commands you can use, which is a great way to learn that particular script. It looks like there are tons of more sophisticated applications available if you want to get into data visualization or some kind of coding, but for my purposes, the main game changer was actually just being able to install Chrome. Scrintl is a knowledge-based productivity app that combines the best of network note-taking with mind mapping. Think of it as a giant database where every single piece of writing you create is recorded in a card format that can also be rearranged on a mind map. You can add images, video links, and even hashtags to these cards, and once they're on your board, you can then connect them to other cards to show some kind of relationship between the two concepts. It's brilliant for complex research assignments, like the time I was trying to figure out exactly how Disney's business model worked, and thanks to great search functionality, you can make sure that you never lose any information ever again. You can do a surprising amount with web apps these days. It's not just about checking your emails or looking at spreadsheets and Google slide presentations. You could even delve into a bit of content creation if you want to use Canva or Adobe Express. The big drawback of the Steam Deck is you're not really going to be able to install those professional programs like Photoshop or Lightroom without installing Windows completely. You are going to be somewhat limited in terms of accessories too. For example, it's pretty hard to get a webcam to connect with the Steam Deck. I know some people have found a workaround where you can use a mobile phone. That said though, if you are just sticking to general productivity tasks and maybe you don't want to pick up a dedicated computer for it, then the Steam Deck could actually serve as a low-key companion whenever you need to just get stuff done. I could absolutely see this as a great option for students who want a really good gaming console and a laptop laptop on a budget price. The Steam Deck is a gaming console first and foremost though. In my original Steam Deck review, I noted that while I loved the device, there were some elements I found a little frustrating. In particular, the fact that even lightweight titles seem to crash very easily on the Steam Deck, and when it came to games like Baldur's Gate, I was completely unable to get through the second act of that gameplay as it became a little bit more power intensive. As someone who is rediscovering PC gaming through the Steam Deck, I wrote this off as teething issues, but thanks to many of your comments, I started to realise that actually this could be an underlying problem with my particular device. The sheer frequency of crashes I was experiencing, even having lowered my performance settings to those recommended by people on Reddit, was actually increasing, and I was starting to get really fed up with trying to get through relatively simple games like Cocoon without having to worry about crashes. And this all came to a head when I decided to start playing Dredge. For those who don't know, Dredge should not be a game that is putting too much pressure on the Steam Deck, but for some reason I couldn't get through a couple of minutes without the game completely freezing on me. I should also note that my Steam Deck was a refurbished model that I bought for a discounted price from the Steam store, and so this decline in reliability really started to make me wonder if there was something more wrong with my Steam Deck. Looking back, I realised that whenever my Steam Deck was plugged into the wall, I would get much better performance, and actually, as long as I made it past the sort of 15-minute window, the Steam Deck usually kept itself together and allowed me to get 1 or 2 hours of gameplay. But it was really just starting up games and getting through those initial moments that it really struggled with. The way I've seen this described by others is that the power supply needs to use quite a lot of energy to actually boot up a game and get it running. But in some Steam Deck models, this doesn't appear to move up to the required level, and so the game actually shuts down just because there isn't enough supply to keep it running. I decided to contact Steam support about this to get to the bottom of the issue, and they ended up deciding to RMA the product. I want to say a huge thank you to the Steam support, because actually, although it's a fairly lengthy process here in the UK, they do try to help you troubleshoot the issue yourself, and then if nothing's working, they will just send you a replacement device. So I basically made my first request on the 28th of November, and it took me until the 10th of December to actually get the RMA issued. The Steam support want you to go through very specific troubleshooting steps, which they will send you through one message at a time. After going through all of that, they will send you through instructions on how to prepare your device as well as a shipping label. And then what happens here in the UK is you send it off to a collection centre somewhere in the Midlands, and then that actually gets shipped out to Prague to be assessed. It wasn't until the 15th of December that I actually managed to get everything together and take it to the post office. I didn't get a response until the 29th of December to confirm that my shipment had actually arrived there. That can feel like a long time if you're waiting for a replacement, but I also don't want people to have to work over Christmas, so I'm completely fine with it taking a little bit longer. Anyway, they eventually shipped out my replacement device on the 2nd of January, and it was in my hands on the 4th of January. Out of the box, I was really excited to get back into my Steam library and finally play Dredge, which I'd been really looking forward to playing. One thing I was definitely going to do this time around was only use the official power supply unit provided by Valve. With my other device, I had tested out different docking stations and charging packs, and I was a bit paranoid that using those had somehow created a power surge that had crippled the battery on my original device. So I just stuck to the official power supply this time around, and for the best part of a day, it seemed to really work. As I got into the games, I could really tell that this replacement model was already performing a lot better than my original device. The fans were much quieter, and I hadn't seen any sign of a crash. The big problem occurred though when I allowed the Steam Deck to run down to 0% battery and turn itself off. I immediately knew there was something wrong because the LED indicator was not illuminating once I plugged in the power cable, and from that point on I was just never able to bring my Steam Deck back to life. And so I got back in touch with the Steam support team, and they pretty quickly realised that I needed a replacement device again. At this point I was pretty gutted, to be honest, because I've now gone through 2 of these devices. It's a device that I really want to love, but so frustrated by the issues that I've experienced so far, and both times being with the power supply or the battery. With potentially another month ahead of me without access to the Steam Deck, I had a real think about what I wanted to do next. It might sound a bit counterintuitive, but I decided that I was actually just going to go ahead and buy a Steam Deck OLED. Looking around on the internet, I knew that the OLED wasn't free of its RMA issues, but it's not just a screen upgrade, is it? It's got completely new internals as well as a new battery that lasts for a bit longer anyway. I thought, you know, I've made a bit of ad revenue from my previous Steam Deck review. I may as well reinvest that into the channel, pick up an OLED and give it a review from a casual gamer's perspective. And, you know, I can always send it back if I don't feel like it's the one for me. Of course, I'm still going to get my refurbished model back, and I'm basically going to make sure that it works and then trade it in at a pawn shop or sell it on eBay, something like that. I have to say though, my early impressions of the Steam Deck OLED are that it is a massive upgrade. I mean, it feels lighter in my hands, it feels like it's running a lot better, the fans are much quieter, haven't had a single crash. I'm not sure whether this is because it's a brand new model as opposed to a refurbished model, or just that those internal changes have really improved it as a device. But my recommendation at the end of this is basically, if you feel that you have some kind of issue with your Steam Deck, don't just keep putting it off. Definitely get in touch with the Steam store and see whether there may be an underlying issue or fault. Now, I don't feel very confident recommending that you pick up a refurbished model. The Steam Deck OLED is so much more than just a display update. And usually when these big tech companies announce upgrades, you think about it being catered towards the more dedicated user base. But in the case of the Steam Deck OLED, it actually makes the system a much more viable option for casual gamers, because its improved battery life and performance means that you don't have to tinker as much, and you can basically use this as a handheld gaming console if you don't want to tap into all of the handheld PC features. As a busy dad who has to use his time for gaming very wisely, here's my view on whether you should get an OLED Steam Deck instead of the original version. While there are many important updates to the Steam Deck OLED, you won't necessarily be able to tell that upon a quick glance. At the same time, it is really difficult to take your eyes off that display. Not only have Valve brought a stunning OLED display to the Steam Deck, they've also reduced the bezels and been able to expand the size of the screen from 7 inches to 7.4, all while keeping the exact same dimensions of the original Steam Deck. The display has now also jumped from a 60Hz to a 90Hz refresh rate, and while that might not impact every game you play, you'll certainly notice that it seems a lot zippier when you're moving around the SteamOS. The original LCD panel of the Steam Deck looked a little washed out, to the extent where some people had to create third-party plugins that allowed you to boost the saturation of your screen. But there's no such problems for the OLED, which looks incredibly vibrant and sharp. And you'll really notice the difference if you play the Steam Deck in bed a lot, like I do, with my son sleeping next to me. Because the OLED is switching off LEDs that aren't being used to produce colour, you get an incredibly true black, and that means in those dark environments, you're going to get an incredibly crisp and clear colour, even if you're playing on the absolute dimmest brightness. If you buy the truly top tier Steam Deck, you actually get an etched glass, which is supposed to give an anti-glare effect. But I knew that I was going to put a screen protector on my Steam Deck anyway, and I decided to just pick up the mid-range model, 512GB. Reflections haven't been a massive issue for me. But perhaps the biggest benefit of having an OLED over the LCD panel is that it's a little bit thinner, and that means that Valve have been able to pack in a slightly bigger battery, which is capable of 30 to 50% longer battery life. That means that depending on the title, you can now game from between 3 and 12 hours. As someone who tends to play a lot of indie games, I'm really reaping the benefits of this, especially as now that the device is also 30 grams lighter, it's just that little bit more portable, and I really enjoyed taking this on long train journeys to work. Valve's own carrying case that they ship to you with the Steam Deck is incredibly bulky, and it can be difficult to squeeze into your backpack if you've got other things you need to take with you, for example, your laptop, headphones, maybe a water bottle. The 1TB model does come with kind of a sleeve that you can slip in and out of this big case. But if you are going to be using the Steam Deck to travel with, I would recommend picking up dbrand's Kill Switch case, which not only protects your Steam Deck really well, it also comes with this travel guard that you can simply clip onto the front of your device. and essentially you get this really hard exoskeleton that you can just put into your bag. To clarify, this video is not sponsored by dbrand in any way. I bought this case with my own money. I just really recommend it. And another cool thing about the kill switch case is that you have this little kickstand on the back that you can remove if you like, and you can even store up to 4 micro SD cards in there. All in all, these updates come together to create this impression of a much more polished Steam Deck experience. While I found the original LCD model to be quite frustrating and have a lot of weird underlying issues, I haven't experienced any crashes or any problems with the Steam Deck OLED, but its improved performance and efficiency also means that I've had to tinker with it a lot less. And if you are a bit more of a casual gamer who doesn't want to go into Reddit threads to find out the exact settings for every game, then you'll have a lot more confidence that you can just pick up a game and start playing this without delving too deeply into the settings. SteamOS is definitely the absolute best user experience on any of these handheld devices, but it does come with the drawback that you're not going to be able to boot all Windows games. So anything from epic games like Fortnite or Fall Guys, you're not going to get it on the Steam Deck. It is possible to stream Game Pass through Internet Explorer, but it's an incredibly finicky process to set up, and it's not really the ideal way of playing those Game Pass Ultimate games. So really, in terms of official games, you'll be limited to what you can find through the Steam Deck library. And while there are some AAA titles that have made real strides to ensure compatibility, you will still find titles that are a little bit slower to actually get themselves ready for the Steam Deck. One of the really cool things about Steam in general, though, is access to all those indie titles that just pop up out of nowhere and become a cult classic. A lot of these do end up being on the likes of the Nintendo Switch or PlayStation, but it's often a year or so later. I think it's worth getting a Steam Deck just to be able to play these games on launch and not have to sit around worrying if they'll even come out on a console you otherwise own. Especially when these kind of games seem to make a lot more sense on a handheld form factor. Of course, you can massively expand what the Steam Deck is capable of if you have ROMs that you are willing to boot up on your device. And one of the great things about the Steam Deck compared to a lot of other handheld PC and emulation systems is that it has a great integration with EmuDeck that can get most, if not all, of the popular emulation software out there set up on your Steam Deck at the push of a button. If you're playing ROMs that have multiple discs that need to be mounted, it can get a little bit more complicated to set up, but for most ROMs that just one file and done, the Steam Deck is an incredibly easy way to access that catalogue. And with it being touchscreen as well, even those systems that do rely on touch input are going to be possible to play on the Steam Deck. Were it not for very specific titles like Pokemon or Legend of Zelda, I wouldn't really be picking up my Switch anymore, because a lot of the indie games I like to play come out on the Steam store a year in advance of Nintendo sometimes. And with that brand new OLED display and those improved internals, it just makes it feel like a much more grown-up console experience than something like the Switch. Whereas before I was a little hesitant to recommend the Steam Deck to everyone, I now see it as the perfect way to get into PC gaming, or to just steal a few hours of free time to try and get through that backlog of games